Part 1. The responsibility on my shoulders. Sometimes life changes with just one phone call. I was born into an ordinary family. My father was an engineer, my mother was a teacher, and I was the eldest of 3. Carol and Michael were my younger siblings. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't poor either. Our small house was always filled with laughter, family dinners, and a comforting sense of security. I always wanted more. I longed for a different future, a life that wasn't just enough. So I threw myself into my studies, earning a scholarship to pursue computer programming. Long nights in my dorm room, stacks of study materials, cold cups of coffee, and tangled lines of code, those were the prices I was willing to pay for my dreams. Then, one day, the call came. I had just stepped out of the lab, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, when my phone rang. My mother's panicked voice sent a chill down my spine. "Tessa, your father? He had a heart attack. They couldn't save him." I don't remember how I got to the hospital. I just knew that by the time I arrived, my father was gone. My mother sat quietly in a corner, her trembling hands clutching a crumpled handkerchief. Carol and Michael clung to each other, sobbing, while I stood frozen, unable to shed a single tear. The grief was too immense, too numbing. The months that followed were a nightmare. My father had been the family's main provider, and without him, everything fell apart. My mother's teaching salary wasn't enough to cover everything, so she took on extra cleaning jobs on weekends. Every night, I watched her return home with calloused hands and dark circles under her eyes, yet she still tried to smile. As the eldest, I couldn't just stand by and watch my family struggle. I made the only choice I could. I moved back home. Between classes, I cooked, did laundry, took Carol and Michael to school, and helped my mother manage our dwindling finances. I knew I couldn't drop out because my education was the only way to change our future. So, I pulled all-nighters to finish assignments, coded in 24-hour cafes, and rushed home before my mother collapsed from exhaustion. Those days were brutal, but I had no other option. I was the only one who could stand up for my family. And even if it meant sacrificing my youth, I was ready to carry that weight. Part 2. The weight of sacrifice. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply happens. After my father passed away, I became the backbone of my family. Days blurred into nights as I balanced university, part-time jobs, and taking care of my mother and siblings. I told myself that this was temporary, that one day things would get better. But the truth was, I never had a choice. The first time I truly felt the weight of my sacrifice was on a cold winter evening. I had been working late at a cafe, coding until my fingers felt numb. My shift at the bookstore started in an hour, and I still had 2 assignments due by midnight. Exhausted, I made my way home, hoping to catch even just a moment of warmth before heading out again. When I opened the door, the smell of my mother's cooking filled the air. Carol was setting the table, and Michael was laughing at something on TV. For a moment, it felt like our old life was still there, until I saw my mother's hands. They were red and cracked from scrubbing floors all day. She tried to hide them, tucking them behind her back when she noticed me staring. But I knew. I always knew. That night, as we ate, Michael talked about his dreams of becoming an astronaut. Carol wanted to be a musician. My mother smiled, listening to them with tired eyes. And then Carol turned to me. "Tessa, what about you? What do you want to be?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I had spent so long working for my family that I had forgotten what I wanted. The dreams I once had, the passion for coding, the excitement of building something new, all felt like distant memories. My dreams had been traded for bills, grocery lists, and sleepless nights. I looked at my mother, at my siblings, and forced a smile. "I just want to see you all happy." No one noticed the way my heart clenched as I said it. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at my laptop screen. I could hear my mother coughing in her sleep, Michael murmuring in his dreams, and Carol softly humming a tune. I had given up so much for them. But deep down, I wondered, was there a limit to how much one person could sacrifice before losing themselves entirely? And what about you? Have you ever given up your dreams for the people you love? Have you ever questioned if it was worth it? Because I did, every single day. Part 3. The price of selflessness. It's strange how easily we convince ourselves that sacrifice is just a phase, that one day things will get better and we'll have time to chase our own dreams. But what if that day never comes? It had been months since that winter night when my sister asked me what I wanted. Since then, I had buried myself deeper into responsibility. Longer shifts, more tutoring sessions, and an increasing sense of exhaustion that settled into my bones like an old friend. One evening, after another grueling day, I came home to find my mother asleep on the couch, an unpaid electricity bill resting on her lap. The sight made my chest tighten. I took the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. Another bill, another problem to solve. I was so used to carrying the weight that I didn't realize it was crushing me. The real breaking point came when I received an email, an acceptance letter from a prestigious tech company. A dream opportunity, the kind of job that could change my life. But the job required me to move to another city. As I stared at the email, my mind raced. If I left, who would take care of my mother? Who would help my siblings with their studies? Who would make sure the bills got paid on time? Guilt wrapped around my throat like a noose. That night at dinner, I couldn't bring myself to tell them. Michael was excitedly showing off his latest school project. Carol was singing as she helped our mother clean the dishes. The thought of leaving them, of not being there every day, made me feel like the worst person in the world. So I made a decision. I typed out a polite email, thanking the company for their offer, but declining it. My hands shook as I pressed send. For the first time in my life, I felt what it truly meant to lose yourself for the sake of others. Days passed, then weeks. Life continued as usual, work, school, responsibilities. But something inside me had changed. A dull ache settled in my chest, a constant reminder of what could have been, and yet no one noticed. No one asked if I was okay. No one saw the dream I had buried beneath my duty. And you, have you ever made a choice that broke you just to keep others whole? Have you ever wondered what your life could have been if you had chosen yourself instead? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to share. Part 4. The first disappointment, when sacrifice becomes a burden. My life changed significantly after selling the app. Money was no longer a major concern, but that didn't mean I could rest. I threw myself into work, building my own company, focused on smart home technology. Every day was packed with meetings, lines of code, and strategies for product development. However, while I was striving to build a future, my family started relying on me more and more. My mother no longer had to work extra cleaning jobs, but she began desiring more luxurious things. Carol and Michael still had no real direction in life. I provided for them, paid their rent, and sent them money every month, yet they seemed to see it as an entitlement rather than kindness. I remember the exact day I realized things had gone too far. Carol called me late at night, her voice filled with excitement. "Tessa, I think you should buy me a car. Something nice and fancy, like yours. I can't keep driving this old junk forever." I remained silent for a long moment, holding back my disappointment. "Carol, if you really need a new car, you can buy one yourself. I've helped you enough. You have millions. Are you seriously being stingy with your own sister?" Her words cut deep, like a blade straight to my heart. She wasn't grateful anymore. She was demanding. I hung up the phone, feeling completely empty inside. When did my love and responsibility turn into an obligation that I was forced to fulfill? When did my genuine help become a permanent duty? The next morning, as I walked into my office, the place I had poured my sweat and tears into building, I realized something. I couldn't keep living like this. I could love my family, but I couldn't let them exploit me any longer. It was time to make a decision. Part 5. The moment I realized what truly mattered. A bitter awakening. After that phone call with Carol, I felt like I had hit a breaking point. I couldn't keep giving in to their demands. I needed to reevaluate what truly mattered in my life. But it wasn't easy. Every time I tried to pull away, they would pull me back. Michael, who had never worked a day in his life, called me to ask if I could cover his rent for the third month in a row. I said no. It was hard. He was my brother after all. But I needed to stand my ground. The next few days were filled with guilt. I would lie awake at night, listening to the silence of my empty apartment, wondering if I was being too harsh. Was I selfish? Shouldn't I be helping them, considering everything I had? But then, something happened that changed everything. One evening, I received a message from my mom. It was a simple text. "I don't need anything. You've already done so much for us. Take care of yourself, Tessa." Those words, so simple, yet so powerful, hit me harder than I expected. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, my mom wasn't asking for anything. She was acknowledging my sacrifices. But as I sat there staring at her message, a new realization hit me. It wasn't about the money or the material things. It was about respect, about mutual respect. I had spent so many years giving, but I had forgotten what it meant to receive. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer let guilt control my actions. I would give where it was appreciated, but I wouldn't give just to be needed. I had to honor my own limits. It wasn't an easy road. There were moments when I questioned myself, wondering if I was being too harsh or too distant. But in the end, I understood something crucial. True love is not about sacrificing yourself endlessly for others. True love is about boundaries, respect, and understanding that you deserve the same care you give. Now, my relationships with my family are different. We are still close, but I no longer feel like I have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. I've learned that it's okay to say no, and that by doing so, I'm actually showing them how to stand on their own. Has your family ever made you feel like you're obligated to give endlessly? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. If this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe for more. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on all the latest videos. Let's talk about setting boundaries with family. You deserve to be heard too. Part 6. The freedom of breaking the chains. As time passed after that life-changing text from my mom, I thought I had figured everything out. I was finally putting myself first, setting boundaries and standing my ground. I felt empowered, like a new version of myself was emerging. But just when I thought I had everything under control, life had another challenge in store for me. It came in the form of a phone call from my dad. He asked me, almost casually, "Hey Tessa, could you help me with a loan? I've had some trouble with my business lately." For a moment, I froze, my stomach twisted. My first instinct was to say yes. After all, he was my father. But then I remembered the promise I made to myself. I wasn't going to allow guilt to push me into doing things I wasn't ready for anymore. I thought about all those years when I had been the one to clean up everyone's mess, paying off debts, helping with bills, and sacrificing my own dreams just to keep the peace. I thought about the times when my heart would race at the thought of saying no, afraid of disappointing them. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I said, "Dad, I wish I could, but I just can't. I've got my own life to take care of now." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a second, I thought I might have made a huge mistake. But then my dad's voice came through, gentler, more understanding than I had expected. "You're right, Tessa. I should have been more responsible. I'm sorry for putting you in that position all these years." In that moment, I realized something profound. Saying no didn't just free me, it also freed those around me. By not giving in to their every request, I was allowing them to grow and take responsibility for their own lives. It wasn't easy at first. The guilt would still sneak up on me at times, making me second-guess my decisions. But with each no, I felt lighter. I felt more like the person I was supposed to be, not just the person others needed me to be. As I started saying no more often, I found that I had more time and energy for the things I truly cared about. My career, my passions, and most importantly, myself. I had finally broken free from the chains of guilt and obligation. I was no longer defined by what I could give, but by who I was. Part 7. The ultimate power of letting go. Embracing your true path. It's strange, isn't it? How sometimes the hardest part of healing is realizing you've been holding on to something that was never really yours to keep. After I had learned to say no to others, after I had set my boundaries and stopped living my life on someone else's terms, I thought I was free. I thought I was finally living for myself. But there was one last piece of the puzzle I hadn't yet faced. Letting go of the expectations I had placed on myself. For so long, I believed that success meant something specific. It meant climbing the career ladder, meeting society's deadlines, and constantly doing more. It meant perfecting myself to fit into a mold that, quite honestly, never fit me. I'd been chasing this version of success that didn't align with my true desires. The weight of it all had started to feel suffocating, but I didn't know how to step away from it. Then came the turning point. It happened during a late-night conversation with an old friend, Lily. She asked me, "Tessa, what do you really want to do with your life?" The question hit me like a wave. What did I want to do? I had spent so many years running after goals that weren't mine, living a life that wasn't mine, and yet I had never asked myself that simple question. After some reflection, I realized that the answer was clear. I wanted to write, create, and share stories that helped others feel seen and heard. I wanted to inspire, not just achieve. But here's the kicker. I had been so terrified of stepping into that path because it didn't look like the success I had been taught to pursue. Letting go of that image of success wasn't just about changing my goals. It was about releasing my old self. It was terrifying, but also freeing. I stopped worrying about how others would perceive me. I started to follow my own rhythm, not the one dictated by the world's standards. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, moments when the old fear crept in. But every time I leaned into the discomfort, I felt a little lighter. I felt closer to the person I was meant to become. And you know what? The more I let go of the expectations I had placed on myself, the more I stepped into the person I truly was. And suddenly, everything felt like it was falling into place. It was hard to trust myself at first. But with every step I took in the direction of my true desires, I realized letting go wasn't just about release. It was about embracing my authenticity, embracing my purpose, and most importantly, embracing my freedom. Sincere thank you. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. Every view, like, and comment is an enormous encouragement, motivating me to continue writing more meaningful stories. I hope this story has brought you genuine emotions, a moment of reflection, or simply a little break from the busyness of life. Don't forget to subscribe. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future stories. And if you have any thoughts, feelings, or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'm always eager to listen and improve to bring you the best content. Thank you so much. See you in the next stories.